TYT Community here on the TYT Network. Tonight is the Social Justice Show, where we break down some of the important social justice stories here on the TYT Network. Got a lot of great stuff for you tonight, and a great panel to discuss it with. With me, of course, is Stephen Buckley. We've got Jordan with us tonight, Jordan French, and joining us again is Haven. Welcome, Haven. Welcome, everyone.
Evening.
Hey.
Good to have you guys here on the show. Like I said, it's going to be a great show. We've got a mass walkout at a Chipotle's. That's interesting. Interesting facts about a megachurch. We've got a Canadian. You won't believe this Canadian asshat that we're going to talk about. That's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, but first, before I get into that, I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight on the Social Justice Show, which, of course, I'm filling in for Rhiannon Avenine in her absence. So looking forward to having her coming back and talking about the most important social justice stories of the week. With that said, I want to start with our first social justice story, the Chipotle's walkout. A Chipotle's in Pennsylvania was shut down after several employees walked out after posting a note. Now, what did this note say? Well, let's read it. Want to know why we're closed? Ask our corporate officers why their employees are forced to work in borderline sweatshop conditions. Almost the entire management and crew have resigned. Apparently, it's people over profits. And notice the Chipotle swag. I'm not sure what that's all about, but that's an interesting hashtag. So there you go. Interesting note. Now, the company has confirmed that a few employees have quit, thus locking out the other workers who the company says were, quote-unquote, enthusiastic to get back to work. I wouldn't say enthusiasm so much as, oh my God, I'm desperate for this job. I need my money. But that's just me. Now, according to Think Progress, the sign was posted by Penn State student Stephen Healy, who had been a part-time manager. Now, he says the conditions at the store have been deteriorating, and he felt that it was the only way to try and affect change. It's an interesting way to go about it. He also said that the store was extremely understaffed, with just 6 or 8 employees on days where they needed about double that, which meant that workers often had to put in 11-hour shifts without breaks. Wow, that's rough. He said, quote, "We've just felt neglected. Working conditions are heinous." Now, while he also says, look, I'm not attacking Chipotle's, I'm not attacking the corporation, and I'm actually not looking for a strike, I just want to see better treatment of employees. Interesting take on that. And I want to go to the panel for your take. What do you think? Was this a good idea? Do you think this will help with his goals, or what do you think would solve these problems like these with the terrible conditions at some of these restaurants?
I think it's amazing that they managed to get an entire workforce to walk out, and I think that a lot of people that are working in these fast food restaurants are gaining the same kind of fervor that we saw in the beginning of our workers' revolution back in the early 30s. And this is the ground zero. We just had the sit-in in New York from McDonald's. Now we have this. And it brings a lot of attention to the fact that these people are basically seriously abused as workers. And because people have this notion that working at a fast food restaurant is somehow a teenager's job or a job for somebody who might be beneath them, it's okay to ignore the things that happen to them, which is just insane. So I'm glad that they were to do such a nonviolent, blatant act of just, we're sick of it and we're gonna make you guys hear us?
I mean, for me, I think it was obviously the right thing for them to do because it's going to get some attention, and because this is bad press for the executives, they probably will make some changes. Whether they make nationwide changes is something to remain. In this specific instance, they may say, okay, we've realised that we've understaffed, we'll hire a few more people, and that might solve some of the issues, because some of the gripes of the current employees with that they had a really erratic time schedule and that they were given 24 hours notice whether they were going to be working or not. And to be honest, that sort of gripe, I don't think that's a major gripe. I mean, I've had some jobs where you just got to be at work at a second's notice. I've worked at a summer school where teachers have just walked out because they said, I'm not dealing with these conditions, it's not worth the money. And so, at least in this case, all of the workers walked out, and I think that's probably the most important point, is that if only 5 out of the 8 workers, or however many, walked out, I don't think it would have been the right thing to do. But the fact that they got everyone to walk out is a good thing. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to make a huge change, this one individual incident. But as Haven said, there's more and more of these cases coming up. McDonald's recently got sued because of wage theft, and so I think more and more of these fast food, low-income jobs, if more and more people are walking out and showing their outrage at how undervalued they are, then I think it will slowly build up and kind of come to a tipping point where there will be a greater change overall. But I don't think this one instance on its own will make a huge swathe of changes.
Yeah, I feel like it's got to be pointed out, because this is my thing to point out the detail that we're missing. The whole staff didn't get behind this. The management got behind it, and they locked the door, and that includes on the employees that needed to work and didn't feel like that this was a strike or a pseudo strike they could take part in. I mean, like, I get what they're trying to do here. I'm all for people fighting for fair pay. I'm not one of these people who thinks that just because a job is, a fast food job, you should be paid as little as possible. But at the same time, so they had to work 11-hour shifts or whatever. Were they working overtime and not getting paid overtime? Because then you can say this is like a sweatshop. It's still not, but you can say that it's like a sweatshop. If you're being made to work overtime and you're getting paid time and a half or double time or whatever the law requires in your state, then you get to say, my employer is abiding by the law and paying me fairly, and I don't necessarily like it, and I would like it to be better. But don't throw around the terms like sweatshop if there's not some serious wage theft or something like that going on.
Look at we don't know that this isn't quite a situation where if where that didn't happen. We're not sure on that detail. I mean, but there are a lot of different restaurants. You pointed at the recent wage theft story. Wage theft story from McDonald's, and how they and a lot of different fast food companies now use these computer systems to make sure that, to make sure that they're not getting overtime pay for being there. Also, there's instances documented of where, and I'm not saying at Chipotle's, but at different restaurants where they would fudge numbers to make sure that they don't do overtime and things like that. So what we have here, some of the stuff that you pointed up, is just not quite enough information.
And also, those practices are common practices, just like it's a common practice for major corporations to house a lot of their funds in offshore accounts. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Chipotle, wanting to get the competitive edge over their competitors, like McDonald's, would fudge the numbers or make it so that you're working 11 hours, but they bring you in at different times so that it doesn't count. It still counts as a part-time shift rather than a full-time shift. I mean, they're kind of trained now to usurp paying these people. And there's not even just nefarious ways that they're doing it. Having them pay for their uniforms, that's wage theft. Having people, and if not paying for their uniforms, giving them dirty, nasty uniforms, that they have to have upkeep over. That costs money. And none of these companies want to provide the funds that it takes to maintain your uniform, to maintain, transportation, but they want you to sacrifice everything in your life. And I don't know about you, but working 11 hours is not great when you have kids. Working 11 hours is not great when you have a second job. So not having decent amount of notice is an issue that could probably hinder people a lot more than it helps them. So I don't understand how, not giving proper notice or extending people's hours without properly paying them overtime, which they probably don't, is any kind of helpfulness. And I understand that people want to go to work. The lower rung peoples might want to still make their money, but at the end of the day, if nobody stands up, nobody's going to fix this. If nobody says anything about it, if the lower rung people don't see that this is important and their management cares about it, then nothing's going to happen. I would be elated that my management would give a shit enough that they're getting screwed over and also I'm getting screwed over. So it's like there's a balance to everything.
Well, the thing is, I mean, two things. First of all, it's simply bad business. Within this story, they're saying, there was only 8 employees at the time when they obviously needed kind of 13 or 14 employees. That means you're going to be giving bad service to your customers. It means they may not return to that place. It's just inefficient and it's just bad business. Sure, they may still be making money only employing 8 people. But if they employed 14 people, they could be serving more people. They could be making more money theoretically that way. So I just don't think it's bad business. And then also I have to push back slightly against Jordan, saying that some of the employees, they wanted to get back and it was a kind of a management's choice kind of to shut down the place. First of all, it was a company saying that their employees were, quote, enthusiastic to get back. So we don't, the company's likely to come out and say that anyway. And secondly, with it being a manager's choice, in many of these fast foods restaurants and diners, a lot of people are promoted up to kind of part-time managers, or they have manager in their title, and they're not really a manager. They're just given that so they have more responsibilities and barely any little extra pay. They kind of want to promote people up and just give them a new title. So they're saying that over 2 days 4 managers had quit. They were probably just normal level employees that had just been given a title and more responsibilities as well. So I don't think it's necessarily just a managerial kind of decision to shut this place down as well.
Yeah, well, and I have to I just want people to understand where I'm coming from. I mean, it wasn't 2 years ago that I was working 80 to 88 hours a week. I would be putting in, 16, 17, 18-hour days at one job because I needed the money and the hours were available. And it sucked and it was miserable, and that's why I tried to get out of that situation and get a better job. But if and everybody hated that job, and everybody that works there still hates that job. But if people got together and locked the doors or whatever in protest, I would have been pounding on the doors to get in to work at that job I hated because I had 2 kids. I was working 80 to 88 hours a week to support my family. And oh man, it's just I get it. I'm all for. I even support the $15 an hour wage strikes, not because I think $15 an hour is a wage that's tenable for fast food, but because of how negotiation works. And you ask for more than what you expect to get, unless you're Barack Obama. Then you start at the bottom and compromise from there. But this is just, like I say, they went too far. They're at a 10 and they need to be at a 7. I'm all for them protesting it, but don't throw out the sweatshop work because you had to work a long shift. I don't know, you lose me when you go that far.
I mean, the sweatshop thing is hyperbolic, but when you don't have a word that will properly display the stress and the de-stress that you're in, sometimes you need to do a little hyperbolic language so that you get people's attention. It's like, it's easy to have an option back in 2006 when the majority of our good-paying jobs were still in this country. But what we're seeing now is that more and more of our jobs are shifting into a service sector type, apparatus. So you're going to see more and more people who have children or who have other larger responsibilities that are beyond the scope of working at a fast food restaurant that have to work at a fast food restaurant. So if we wait until it's bubbling over and people are ready to do more than just walk out or make hyperbolic language, then that's going to be a problem. There's a time and place for everything. So I think that, yes, it's hyperbolic. Yes, it may have, cock-blocked somebody trying to get a paycheck. But if they don't do this now, when it's done later, it might be too late. And it might be done at a time where it'll be a lot more dangerous. And maybe their freedom to voice their opinion on what's happening to them might get curbed. So they can't speak up.
And also that language, I'll throw out this one couple of final points. The language, sometimes you need to be hyperbolic in order to get people's attention. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that some will make the argument, well, yeah, but it's a franchise. It's not the corporation's fault. It's the franchise. Don't punish the small business owner, except for the fact that this Chipotle doesn't do a franchise. They're not franchised operated, so they are corporate owned, corporate controlled. So I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody who's going to put that out there, which it's a decent thing to point out in those cases where they have the small business owner that bought this franchise. This is not one of those cases. All right. So we'll move on to the next story. A first-term Republican congressman named, start that over again. A first-term Republican congressman named Robert Pittenger was addressing a small crowd of constituents when one of them accused him of not doing enough to secure our borders. Interesting. Of course, Representative Pittenger fought back against those allegations by pointing out to the small crowd, of how he voted for a very good bill, quote-unquote, that would deport all child migrants and dreamers. Yeah, sounds like a very good bill, huh? Now, Think Progress caught up with this representative and asked him if he'd continue to support the deportations in light of some of the recent reports that we've covered here on TYT Community of that some of those children that were deported back to their homes were murdered soon after. He, of course, said, continue the deportations. Continue sending them back home post-haste. Go, send them back. He also said, quote, it's the most egregious, awful crime and a pity. What has happened to these young children? But do you want to open up America's doors to the entire world? We can't handle the health care and education today for our own population. We have to be sensible about what our system can manage. So you put them on planes and you send them back. Now, while it may sound reasonable and logical to you, it actually really isn't. Because he runs in the fallacy that our policy proposals are throwing open the doors to anyone and everyone who wants to come in. No, that's not what we're doing. That's actually not the aim of comprehensive immigration reform, especially the kind that the Democrats have been trying to pass recently. Now, his arguments insist on continuing this ridiculous argument that liberals want immigration to be essentially a free-for-all, and that we shouldn't allow people fleeing from rampant poverty and violence to even have a chance to come here and make their case about why they should be able to stay. Now, I want to go to the panel. I want to ask you guys about this. What do you think?
Well, I can understand why people who aren't necessarily well educated on this particular issue would think, oh, we can't have people. I understand that they're worried about our education system. Our schools won't be able to handle kind of hundreds of thousands of extra children. Our healthcare system won't be able to handle hundreds of thousands of extra people. I understand those concerns, saying, oh, we can't afford it. But the thing is, there's been numerous studies. I know that kind of Jenk talked about it in the post-game yesterday, that immigrants, whether they're illegal or legal, they contribute a hell of a lot to the economy overall. Yes, there may be individuals who, if you did a case study of them, they may take away negatively from the economy in terms of resources, but the vast majority will end up adding to America's economic strength. And the problem with these Republicans, like this guy in this story, is that they see immigration, and as they see many other issues, as just a simple black and white issue. And black and white maybe isn't the best term, but it's either kind of completely full open, anyone can come in, that's it, or we just shut the border down completely. We build a giant kind of iron fence there, and no one's allowed to come in. The things, that's what any rational person is arguing for. You have, again, as you said, reasonable immigration reform. You know, look at Australia, and okay, I know Australia is an island, so it's a bit more easier for them to control their immigration, same with the UK, but you have kind of a points-based system, you know, and you let people in that way. But there are 100 different ways that you can sort out the immigration problem that you could probably have most Republicans would be quite happy with, but they just don't even want to hear the arguments. And the problem is, all of the people who think represent them in Congress, they're kind of Republican representatives, their Republican representatives aren't putting up, you know, any decent proposals apart from, no, shut the border, we'll send the kids back, don't care if they're going to die. And of course, you know, the final point as well is that this guy protesters, I'm a true Christian. It's like, you're sending kids back to their homes where they're probably going to die, and you know, America's founded on, you know, give me your sick, give me your weak. He doesn't care about these kids' lives, and that's also a real shame as well.
Well, I mean, it's definitely from the playbook of superficial solutions that we really don't want to fix. He's definitely overlooking the fact that there's a reason why these kids are leaving their areas, and there's a reason why their areas are so violent, and we are probably the #1 facilitator of the situation that they're in. So whether he likes it or not, we Americans have a responsibility to these children, because our drug policies help facilitate these drug lords to have such a stronghold to ruin the lives of these children and displace them out of their homes and making them leave to the safest place that they know, which is America. And I wouldn't go as far as saying that he's a Christian, because obviously he's not reading the same scripture that a lot of Christians that I know have read, because no one would look at the face of a child or hearing the news of the deaths of children and be like, oh, well, fuck it, you know, kids die all day, you know, just as long as they're brown, I'm okay with it. Like, nobody in the right mind would do that. But this person wants to rile up his base. He wants to show the crotchety old Minutemen that are on the border that he's tough, and that even in the face of children, he's still going to attack the immigrant and get rid of the immigrant as if they don't do anything that helps this country. You have millions of people coming into this border, working in our job system, putting their wages, getting cut into Social Security that they're probably never going to be able to take back if they don't have comprehensive immigration reform. So thank you, immigrants, for at least keeping our Social Security somewhat solvent by putting in and not taking out. I mean, everything is more nuanced than what these conservatives would like to lead on. And everything is a little bit more complicated than what they would like to lead on.
Yeah, to address what the guy actually said here, you know, but do you want to open up America's doors to the entire world? We can't handle the healthcare and education today for our own population. You know what? He's right. We can't. A lot of that has to do because with him, you know, being part of the party that's working to ensure that we don't have decent education and healthcare in America. You know, to privatize our education and to keep us from getting the single payer healthcare that the rest of the developed world enjoys, that is cheaper and more effective than what we have in America. So yeah, he's got a point. He's absolutely right. Of course, he's the reason why he's right, and it's, again, just your typical conservative self-fulfilling prophecy and philosophy of government. And then where he's not right is where he says, do you want to open up America's doors to the entire world? At least I don't. I should say that. Maybe there are some libs out there who hold that position. It's also sort of a conservative position if you're a true libertarian. I think I wish... I don't wish Sean was here, but I wish we had a quote or something to play from Sean about that.
We actually do have a quote from Sean. He does support the people's natural ability to travel.
Oh,
so
there you go.
even he's like, yeah, we open up the borders. It's a human's natural right to travel. So Sean is a perfect example, and we do have that quote from him.
Yeah, but and so thank you, thanks, Chef. The other, but the thing is, like, we're not asking you to open up the borders to everyone. We're asking you to open up the borders to refugee children who are refugees of a war caused by our policy. And this is what we would expect of any other nation. This is like right now in Syria, you know, we expect Jordan and Turkey and other countries around there to open up their border to Syrian refugees. Because there's, and those, they didn't even start that war, right? But these drug wars in South America are a result of our domestic drug policy. This is a war that we should own, and that means owning the waves of refugee, immigrant, you know, unaccompanied minors who are fleeing to escape that. Whatever this guy says, you know, you send them back and it's so sad. Oh, you send them back to a sad situation that you created. You're one of the men who writes our laws and writes our drug policy. Do something about it. If you're going to send the kids back, then fix the policy that they're running from. If you're not going to send them back, then maybe you don't have to work as fast to fix the policy. I think you should for other reasons, but you get my point. And then my final point, just to kind of wrap it all up, is to kind of build on something Steven said. Like, these kids do perform better in school, and at least their first-generation immigrants perform better in the workplace. And why is that shocking, at least in this particular scenario? So you're telling me that these kids, you know, people who are under the age of 18, who have hiked thousands of miles across multiple, you know, countries, just to get here and earn the right to live here, you know, by virtue of being here, like, are we surprised that they work hard and succeed, you know, as opposed to people who are born here and enjoy all the wonderful things that America has to offer, you know, by no effort of their own? Come on, it's common sense.
Well, let's be fair, Jordan. Obviously, they have cantaloupe calves because they're smuggling drugs across the border. No, I want to make one final point, too. It's sort of build on what you were saying about, you know, people who are younger who are, you know, coming to America. And one thing that he wants to do is also kick out the dreamers. Well, who are the dreamers? Those are the people who are born or brought here through no fault of their own and want to become a citizen. They grew up here. This is the only place that they've ever known. Some of them don't even know their original language of the country that they had came from, and some of them do. And to uproot them and to say, get out. You've been here for 13, 14, 18 years, however long you've been here. Too bad. You're going to go back to a place where you have no ties, where you have no hope, essentially, because you didn't win the genetic lottery. Seems wrong to me.
I mean, I just have, you know, two final quick points. I made this point a number of weeks ago on a similar type of story, is that, you know, people like these Republicans, they were all for giving foreign aid to helping out the Yazidis that were stuck on the mountain in Iraq. You know, they wanted to help the women and children there. They cared about those women and children. Yet when it's on their own land, we don't want to help those people out. They want to help out people in other countries that are away, but they don't want to help out people who actually want to come and live in America. Now, my final point is that many of these people are coming across from South America. You know, it's quite a heavily Christian part of the world. That these are, for the most part, I imagine, are fairly Christian people who are trying to come across the border. And this man, who no doubt will proclaim himself to be a true kind of God-believing, God-fearing man, he's turning these Christians away. He's sending some of these Christian children to their death. And I don't think he's smart enough to even realize the entire situation, how he's in a position of power. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, but those Christian kids, they're more than likely Catholic, and isn't that different? And that's what a lot of these evangelical Southern Baptist types see, that separation. They don't see those kids as Christian kids, because if you were to do that, then they would have to look at their own children and be like, oh, if my little Sally was trying to run away from a drug dealer that's trying to put her in the sex trade, or is going to threaten to kill her in regards to her father doing something for the drug dealer, then it's a totally different subject. These conservatives want to separate themselves and any likeness that they have with these people so that they can do these demonizing things. And that's kind of the psyche that even the Minutemen have. If you hear them in their interviews, they don't see these kids as kids. a lot of them see them as grown men who are apparently raping people in their city, which I find very, very hard to believe, but it's disgusting. But that's our conservative party that we have to deal with.
Yeah, it's about dehumanization and demonization. Because once you can dehumanize a group of people, then you can say and do whatever you want to them. All right. Moving on. It'll be a little bit of fun. Now we get to poke back at, and hopefully Nick is watching tonight. I think he is, because we're going to poke some fun at a Canadian. It's rare that we get to make fun of Canada here in America, and when the opportunity arises, we must take it for all it's worth. Which is why we're happy to point out the sheer douchebaggery of one Sam damn it, I knew I was going to mess that up. Sam Soteropoulos. Ugh, what a name. Who thinks it's fun to tweet horrible things about the transgender community. Now you could say, well, but Jeff, people tweet horrible shit all the time. Well, yeah, that's true. But this guy is in a position of authority. You see, Sam is a member of the Toronto School Board and regularly uses his school account to tweet out nonsense such as this. Until I see scientific proof that transgenderism exists and is not simply a mental illness, I reserve the right to not believe in it. And that's, of course, using the hashtag the Toronto School Board. Now, you guys probably ask, is there a point to this story other than saying, look what this asshat posted up on Twitter? Well, yes, I'm actually glad you asked. Because what makes this guy important to point out isn't just a horrible shit he says or tweets, but how much of a coward he is about it. You want an example? Why don't you check out the way he dodged some of these questions in an interview with the Global Post.
So from your most recent tweet about transgendered, you don't believe it, are you saying that people who identify as transgendered are mentally ill?
I'm saying that many parents have come forward to me and they believe that they send their kids to school to study the basics, reading, writing, mathematics. And to have confusing notions of identity introduced to children in kindergarten through elementary school is really something that they feel should be discussed at home.
You didn't answer my question. I asked if you're saying that people who identify as transgendered are mentally ill.
That's not the tweet that I tweeted. I tweeted that I reserve the right to form an opinion on this once I've examined and looked at all the scientific evidence. Reserving the right to an opinion is not necessarily exercising that opinion.
So in this, you're saying is not simply a mental illness. Is there a cure, do you believe?
I reserve the right to form an opinion. And I have not formed an opinion on this at this point.
You didn't answer the question, which was if children who identify as transgender, should they be forced to identify as the gender they're seen as and dress that way and so on?
As I said, many parents, hundreds...
So you're still not answering the question.
I'm answering your question.
You're not answering the question.
I'm speaking on behalf of the parents who come forward, many of them.
I'm asking you what you believe based on your tweet.
I believe I have the right to an opinion and to form that opinion based on evidence that I will seek out and research on my own.
So is it your opinion that it's a mental illness then, as you said?
I have not formed an opinion, but I reserve the right to form an opinion.
And you don't think it's offensive to suggest that they're mentally ill?
I think it's offensive to suggest that mental illness is offensive.
Nobody's saying that.
Seems pretty clear to me that they are.
No, it's saying that somebody is suffering from an illness versus who they feel is their identity.
Classic. Excellent dodging. Except that it's not excellent dodging, it's terrible dodging. But wait, he's not done. It gets worse.
So you also referred to Pride Week Parade as a freak show. Why is that?
I never refer to Pride Parade as a freak show.
Toronto World Pride Parade 2014,
I think
freak
we're off
show
topic
with
here,
politicians.
Christine, with
It's
all due
another
respect.
one of your tweets. Freak show with politicians.
I never said it was a freak show.
This is a direct quote from your tweet. Freak show with politicians.
I was under the assumption that we were doing an interview on the most recent tweet around transgenderism.
Do you not stand behind every tweet you send out?
I do, as a matter of fact.
One of the most divisive influences in Canada today is homosexism. Its disseminators are maliciously rabid. That is also one of your tweets. These are your tweets.
Yes, they are.
They represent your views.
Yes, they do.
So why don't you want to discuss them?
No, I think the words stand for themselves.
So can you clarify it for me?
I don't think there's a need.
Well, I'm asking you because I'm looking for some clarification.
There's no need to. They speak for themselves.
But I don't quite understand it.
Well, you're free to comprehend it any way you wish.
Nothing.
I'm done.
I'm done. Yeah, you're done, all right. Boy, that was awkward. The silence at the last part, and there were several times near the end. That was an 8-minute clip of where they just kind of stared at each other. It was the most awkward thing that I've seen. What do you guys think?
It's like that YouTube video of that little kid who's talking to his mother with that smug look, and he's like, Linda, listen, but you're not listening. And he just goes into this toddler circle argument that's just repetitive and makes absolutely no sense. He probably has the worst verbal acrobatic talent I've ever seen any politician do, because that was ridiculous. But what this video shows is that he knows what he's saying is wrong. And he knows what he's saying is going to hurt him politically. So at least it's good that people like this no longer have the tenacity to say these types of things about transgenders or gays in the public sphere. And kudos to that reporter, because that's something you definitely would have never seen here in America. Our reporters would probably said, oh, well, he says this one thing about gay people, and then somebody else said this other nicer thing, so here's two sides of the story. Who's going to say which one's right or wrong? I really appreciate that this reporter actually grilled him on the things that he said and made him look absolutely stupid.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The reporter deserves a hell of a lot of credit. I hope she gets a bonus or something for that, because it wasn't just kind of she asked him again and again, but she asked him again and again. I mean, as Jeff said, it's an 8-minute long video, and to keep on asking about pretty much the same point for so long is really good going. And secondly as well, I mean, obviously the guy's a painfully stupid man. He knows that he can't defend his positions because they are indefensible. And it's just funny that there's so many politicians. It's like, oh, I didn't say that. That wasn't me. It's like, no, but you said it right here in your tweet. This is what you directly tweeted. This is your account. He goes, well, I stand by my tweets. They are my positions. They speak for themselves. They don't realize they still haven't got their head around that. Anything that they put up on the internet or anything that they do on TV, people can go back and look and make note of what they said. It's brilliant, and I certainly hope he gets kicked off the school board, because you do not want that sort of man in charge of kind of educating your children in any possible tangible way. You don't want him having linked to a position of power. I hope he gets kicked out of office as soon as possible.
And how can you take any debate team that comes out of that school district when they have somebody that's leading it that does a circle jerk argument like that? That was ridiculous, simply ridiculous. But I don't know, I don't see this clip and get discouraged. I actually think that it's a good thing, and it shows light that the transgender community is getting a faster track in becoming accepted, and people identifying the bullshit that people want to spit out about them. You know, some highly successful people are transgender. One of the directors of The Matrix is transgendered. So it's like these people are not hidden. They're not something that's just like crazy living in some box somewhere. These are very successful, highly functioning people who aren't mentally ill. They have certain identities that they want to express from themselves, and they have the right to do that. And I understand that he's trying to, you know, represent the parents, but what about that parent that has that transgender child that wants to go to school and go to school in a safe environment where that kid's not going to get beat up because he or she is wearing clothes that's not socially deemed proper? Like, those parents also need a representative. Those parents also need someone in their corner on the school board that's going to make sure that their children are safe.
I apologize ahead of time if I repeat any points that have already been made here. I've got to confess I haven't been paying the most attention, not because you guys aren't brilliant and worth listening to, but because I've been doing some investigative journalism during this segment. And of course, I have to say that maybe I'm going to side with Sam Soteropoulos, because he is clearly an expert on this subject. This man is a published author, and I have here his book. This is the author of the Everything Mediterranean Diet book, along with Connie Diekman. So clearly, this is a man qualified to speak on issues of mental health and gender identity. But in all seriousness, let's address what he actually said, and on top of how egregious it is, how nonsensical it is. Even if you meet him where he's at and try to see it from his point, it still makes no sense. Because so what does he say? Until I'm convinced that Jeff, can you throw the tweet back up there for me, man? Until I see scientific proof that transgenderism exists and is not simply a mental illness, I reserve the right not to believe in it. Okay, Mr. Sam, I'm going to call you by your first name here because I don't want to keep butchering your last name. If something is a mental illness, again, we're going to try to meet you where you're at. That means it exists, right? You can't say that. That makes no sense. It's like saying, until I see that, being schizophrenic exists and isn't a mental illness, I reserve the right not to believe it. No, all right, so even if what you're saying is true, then, it's still a real thing. Now, you're wrong. That's not what it is. But if that's what it was, then that means it exists. Mental illness is an actual thing. I don't understand how even in this guy's crazy, convoluted, bigoted world, how he could think that made sense.
I mean, bless his tiny little brain for trying to bring science into it. I mean, for that entire eight-minute interview, he didn't really invoke God or religion or the Bible. He just tried to stick to science and, I haven't formed an opinion and stuff. But it's just really sad that he's obviously gotten away with this, holding this viewpoint for so long. It seems, I mean, I don't know how long ago those tweets were, but obviously he's probably held this job for some considerable time, I imagine. So why has no one challenged him? Because, I mean, the reporter seemed smart and she knew exactly what she was doing. But, I mean, I can imagine there are thousands of people who could beat that man in a debate. He'd probably lose in a debate against, a Petuar or something. How has no one realized that this guy is an absolute buffoon? That's one question that I want to know the answer to.
Well, it kind of points to the importance of local elections. Voting in your local elections prevents idiots from from getting positions on the school board. So if you're, and especially in Toronto, because if they could elect a crack-smoking mayor, you can elect idiots like this guy. Toronto, get your progressives out and vote. You got to get rid of these idiots, these morons. They're ridiculous.
Maybe they're just so laid back where they're like, you know what, just let cranky old grandpa say what he needs to say and yell at himself staring at the wall, and we'll just keep doing what we need to do to make sure that our society is running. properly. But I really hope that he's not really an active member in any kind of decision making. Hopefully there's like somebody in the background with the puppet strings that's like really doing something comprehensive with the Toronto School Board. If not, then now we know why people smoke crack in that area, because you have this to work with.
Well, and let's not forget as well, he does serve a purpose in Canadian society. He's obviously probably going to be piss poor at his job, but he gives comedians and people like Dan Spearn at Truth Mashup, just another bit more content to talk about and stuff at. So at least he provides some humour to the Canadian people as well.
Well, he has been on the. I talked to Dan earlier about this before the show, and he has made the Book of Ass Hattery at least once before. So, Dan, if you go and watch Truth Mashup over at youtube.com/cynically-tested, you'll be able to watch some of the segments and watch him get inducted into the Book of Ass Hattery. But for us here in America, this is our first, basically, foray into making fun of Canadian conservatives. It's a new day. It's a new day here at TYT Community.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie though. I'm on this dude's food blog right now, and there is a pumpkin spice soup that looks delicious, and I'm gonna make it.
All power to you, man. Perhaps you can make a better recipe for a soup than a reasoned argument. Anyway, we go on. Fun little segment. The largest churches in the South also apparently give out the largest salaries. This is according to a report done by the Leadership Network and the Vanderbloemen Search Group. According to Huffington Post, the survey found 14% of large churches have a financial bonus structure for their top leader. Interesting. And about 1 in 5 of the big congregations finds ways to collect their money other than passing around the collection plate. And that includes things like online, kiosks in the lobby, etc., right? They're pretty good at raising money, essentially. The northeastern churches are the second highest paying, followed by the West and then the Midwest. Now, this is a fact that you're probably not going to be too surprised about. The lowest paying region in North America is Canada. A little bit of credit for Canada on this one. Now, the report points out the fact that in these places where pastor salaries are higher, wages are often lower than average. Interesting. Now, these two really aren't too related, but nonetheless, I find them both on their own equally fascinating. Now, the report also looked at some trends that are as follows. The larger the church, the more the senior pastor is likely to get paid. Makes sense? The second in command at many churches earns about 70% of the salary of the top executive. Okay? 3/4 of the churches give pay raises between 1 and 5%, and the most common raise was about 3% for 2014. Interesting factoids about what they're doing in the churches. 80% of the large churches were predominantly white, while 20% were made up mostly of another racial or ethnic group or were multi-ethnic. The larger the church, the more likely it is to be a multi-site congregation. Also something that seems to make a little bit of sense. Now, I want to go to you guys, to my panel here, and ask what really strikes you about this report. What do you think? What's your opinion on all this?
I find, the whole kind of giving money and the mega church leaders receiving vast sums in terms of their income just seems outrageous and a rather unchristian thing to have, the whole rich man pass through the eye of a needle, all of that sort of nonsense. The thing that shocks me the most is that last fact you mentioned there, that 80% are predominantly white, and then the other 20%, they're just predominantly of another ethnicity. And it just seems to be sort of, I don't know whether it's just it's not a conscious decision, maybe it is for some people, but just segregation in terms of mega churches. And you do tend to see it when you see the clips online and when they're shown on TV. when you kind of the camera pans round, it will just be a room of completely white people or a room of completely black people or Hispanic people, and I find that kind of, I know, a bit weird in a way. I can maybe understand reasons why, but that's the thing that I just found most troubling. That there seems to be a real segregation amongst the churches, it seems, or at least certainly amongst the mega churches.
I would like to preface my statement by being honest with you guys and letting you know that I am a staunch atheist. So I see a lot of things wrong with this. But what bothers me the most is that these people are preying on believers and sucking out so much funds to do these aesthetically pleasing, grandstanding events and buildings. It's really appalling, and it's infuriating to me that we're not taxing these assholes. So all this money that they're sucking out of our communities, and they're not putting it back in. A lot of the areas that are around these mega churches are either in bumfuck nowhere or in areas that are highly poor, and this money could obviously go back into the community, to the people that they're sucking dry, these fucking vampires, and actually help these people, or maybe help the schools that are in their communities. Like the selfishness of the leaders of these mega churches is so appalling, and I don't see how these followers can read their scripture and read how modest their Jesus lived, and then go to a church like that, and then go home to their shitty apartment and think everything is fine. There's nothing weird about that. There's nothing off kilter. None of it. Everything is hunky-dory.
I mean, just before Jordan jumps in, I mean, full disclosure that I'm an anti-theist, and I think these mega churches are, in some sense, evil. But I know kind of people will push back and say, you know, certainly these mega church parties, oh, look at all the charitable work that we do kind of within the community. Kind of we run, you know, these events and those events. We give some money to homeless shelters and stuff. And whilst that's all fine, and most religions, they say, oh, look at all the good work we do. You know, we get given all this money and then we help a lot of people. But the fact is, it's really inefficient help. If they gave up their salaries, just take that for instance. I mean, there's a whole ton of wealth of kind of maintaining the massive mega churches of buildings that they're in, these massive cathedrals. Just take the salary that these pastors get. If they, you know, they don't need those sort of hundreds of thousands of dollars some of them are on. They could give that out and help even more people, but they don't want to. They're in it for themselves. And Haven's right. They are preying on the vulnerabilities of people. They're just as bad as psychics and tarot card readers, in my opinion. They're preying on people's emotional vulnerability. And yes, these churches, they do provide emotional support for many people, but I feel like people can find emotional support in other ways without having to give up their hard-earned money. And as you're right, in a lot of these places, it is in poorer communities where they need every single dollar that they earn to get by, and they're giving it and basically furnishing these pastors, no doubt, lavish lifestyles, and it is just a little bit sickening. And you just wish that these people would kind of just wake up and think, oh, I can still go to church and fine, but I don't need to give money. You don't need to give money to these churches. It's just not necessary.
One more point until Jordan, really quick. This kind of shows, the stat about people, in these lower income, lower wage areas giving more money. It just shows how good people are. I mean, you can look at the positive side of this and see that these people who don't have much of themselves give more to a cause that they think is good. I mean, these churches, do charitable things, and they think that a lot of that money is going to charity, and they're tithing, they're being good, what they think in their mind is good, being a good Christian. I'm giving to the church, I'm giving to my community, because the church services my community. So it just shows how these people are good people, and say that, we're giving so much of ourselves to this church.
All right, so as the person, the only person on the panel who is not only not an agnostic, atheist, or anti-theist, I think I hit all three of you there, but also has been a pastor, I can assure you that what you guys have to say is very valid. from a Christian perspective. I don't know that it's valid from a non-Christian perspective, because basically what you're approaching is how a nonprofit should work. And there's a very good argument to be made that nonprofits should be run like CEOs, and that the CEOs of nonprofits should make a lot of money if they bring in a lot of money, because that brings you better talent to bring in more money. We don't really do charity that way, and I don't know that we should. But there is an excellent TED Talk. Forget the guy who did it. Jeff, if you could maybe Google that for me while I'm talking, that would be awesome. Like, he didn't convince me, but he made me rethink, at least, maybe it's a valid assumption. But anyway, churches are not nonprofits. Churches are religious organizations, and so I don't think our churches are nonprofits, I should say, but that what works to raise money is not necessarily how a church should be run, is what I'm trying to get at. When I was a pastor, I made $150 a week. Yeah, I was just, raking in all the money from those sheeple and saving it for my lavish lifestyle at $150 a week. But to your point, these places don't just offer emotional support. They feed the sick. They feed the hungry. They heal the sick. They clothe the homeless. To Haven's point about how they could be giving to schools, they do give to schools. Some of them have schools, which presents its own set of problems, because then it's a private versus public school thing. But that's another discussion for another day.
But I would have to disagree with you there. If you're making all that money, there shouldn't be homeless people in your community.
I'm inclined to agree with you.
And if you look at, I'll give credit where credit is due. If you look at what the Mormon Church is doing in Salt Lake City, they pretty much eradicated homelessness in their area, because to them they take what they read in their scripture seriously.
But those Mormons are also wealthy as they can be, and that's where I'm going.
But my problem is, my problem is not just with the church. I think the NFL should not have this, should not have this privilege either. They're also a nonprofit, and I don't understand how people can see the NFL and not see that this is a profit motive organization. So obviously we are screwing, my main issue is that we are screwing over people who can no longer be screwed over. We have enough people sucking the life out of us that the institutions that these people look towards, they look towards the church to be there for them, to protect them, to find guidance in them, to find communities in them. And maybe not someone like you, but Joel Osteen is sucking the life out of these people.
Well, and that was something I wanted to get at. Joel Osteen's brand of Christianity is you become a Christian to make money kind of thing.
Right. And
there are a lot of mega church pastors out there like that. But then there are a lot of other mega churches that approach it just from a standpoint, and this is basically what a mega church is. It's an American model of Christianity that was raised in this free market American idea, and the church is run more like a business than it is like the church is traditionally run. And what I mean by that is not that it's run to make money. I mean it's the way that success is measured is off of the same kind of metrics that a business would be measured. So things like numbers and turnout, there's going to be a lot of data and stuff like that. Like, that's how a pastor gets judged as a success. Whereas in the past, a pastor, would have been judged as successful, by the bonds and the connections that he formed, with the people who in his parish. And churches would have been much smaller. Obviously, in a mega church like this, you're not going to be able to form those bonds. And I have a serious problem with that. To me, that is a very worldly way to approach church. Whether or not it raises a lot of money and does a lot of good, to me is kind of an unchristian concept, just because I think Christianity is all about, while maximizing the effort you put into something, that you don't necessarily make the effort for the turnout or for what is quote unquote supposed to work, but you do it because it's the right thing and because you believe it's what God has called us to do. Dan Pelota, the way we think about charity was what I was referencing. Thanks for that, Jeff.
I do have a question. And I don't mean to put the voice of Christianity on your shoulders, but since you're the only believer here, I kind of have to. Mm-hmm. You obviously recognize the fault in this system, and I'm pretty sure that there are more Christians that recognize the fault in this system than don't. So why don't you guys have a self-correcting mechanism within your community to slow this down or stop them, or point, at the very least, give acknowledgement to what these people are doing. Because I know a lot of atheists that are very progressive and very, out there, are more than willing to point this thing out. But I think that none of that would change unless it changes within the community. So do you see any change or any direction or any possibility of a direction going in that way?
Well, sure. Gosh, there's all sorts of movements, and well, not even movements, because the mega church is a fairly new invention. Again, like I say, it's an American phenomenon. But the reason why mega churches spring up and can't be corrected is because, back to my point, to the nature of a mega church. Mega churches they're going to be mostly either non-denominational, meaning they don't answer to any greater denominational body other than themselves, or Southern Baptist, or other what you would call congregationalist traditions that are going to fall into evangelical Protestantism. And one of the foundational pillars of that branch of Protestantism is the autonomy of the individual church. Even in the Southern Baptist Convention, where your churches are loosely linked together and get together and have a convention, that convention cannot make a binding declaration about anything. So basically the only thing the Southern Baptist Convention actually has control over is its missionaries. In terms of the individual churches, each church has autonomy. And then that's true of the non-denominational churches, obviously. And that was where I was going earlier, talking about how these things are run like corporations. So they're not run as part of a greater whole. They start out as a startup, and since you don't have an ecclesiastical structure, meaning you don't have deacons, priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, etc. Basically, your pastors, since they can't become bishops, they have to become super pastors, and they grow this giant startup into a giant business. And then in the case of, I'm not going to name any of them, but in the case of some of them, they basically they become a non-denominational denomination, and instead of kind of manifesting itself as a church and a denomination, it becomes a corporation, and they just start out branches, pretty much named after whatever the first church was. And it's like I say, it's a very, if you're judging things, like I say, from the American model and looking, at the way the world would judge success, it can be a very successful model. It can grow churches, and it can do a lot of good if it's used properly. Obviously, it can also be abused, and I think you pointed out an excellent situation there with Joe Osteen, who is more of a theological abuser, but we've certainly seen how many pastors have we seen in scandals about what they're doing with their money. So it can be used in much more nefarious ways, and I have a problem with it strictly on theological grounds. But to wrap it up, I think pastors work their tails off. I know that because I've been one. In my one of my introduction to ministry classes back in college, we looked at this survey that was done where different parishioners were asked how much they expected their pastors to spend, how many hours a week to spend doing different duties. And so it was, sermon preparation, time at the church, visiting the sick, going out and doing service projects, stuff like that. But they weren't asked to put it all together. Certain people were asked of a few of them. Other people were asked of a few of them, so they didn't have any idea what the aggregate of hours would add up to be. And not only did it add up to more than the hours of a work week, it added up to more than there were hours in a week, period. Meaning they expected their pastors to be working more than 24 hours a day. And some of us were doing that for $150 a week. But I think what pastors, the way that the churches should kind of handle this is to pay pastors in ways that are harder to abuse. So like give them, a parsonage, a place to live, give them a good insurance plan, but don't give them a ton of cash money for them to go spend on a luxurious lifestyle. There's ways for the churches to manage resources in a way to, thank the pastor and keep the pastor and his family safe and able to do what he's doing for the church, but are much harder to abuse than giving them tons and tons of money that could be spent better elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's no wonder that these megachurch pastors are working so hard. They're working so hard because they get so much bloody money for it. That's the issue. And I think you're right that there needs to be some change in the way that the incentive structure is there for them kind of to gain their income. You're right, they don't need hundreds of thousands. It's not anywhere near any Christian teachings that these people should be getting £100,000. And if they truly believed, they wouldn't be, or maybe they would take that salary and they'd instantly give half of it away to charity or educational needs. But the thing is, people like Joel Osteen and other people of that ilk, they're in it for the money. They're in it for themselves, the ego, the prestige that they get with it. And that's just, it's narcissism at its worst, because it's negatively impacting on some of the poorest people in their own communities. And that's the most frustrating thing about it.
All right. We're going to have to move on this one. Great discussion, guys, and Haven as well. A lot of great points. So we are going to move on to the next story. Speaking of religion, head of the Archdiocese of Chicago, Cardinal Francis George, recently wrote a column that charged that, quote, Catholics in America are being forced to choose between their faith and the quote-unquote state religion, which imposes its own form of morality on everyone. Interesting. According to him, it also compels people to support sinful things like abortion and gay marriage, and if you don't support these things, then you're apparently a second-class citizen, just like the Christians and Jews who are fined for their religion in countries governed by Sharia law. Yes, he made that comparison. Sharia law. This man does not understand the mission of irony, just like he doesn't understand or acknowledge the great disparity in numbers and power between Christians and, for example, non-Christians here in America. Now, the absolutely dumbfounding thing about this is that he uses the example of how Jews and Christians do pay a tax in countries governed by Sharia law, when in America, churches are tax exempt. When you make that argument, you lose, because it makes no sense. He even says this, quote, swimming against the tide means limiting one's access to positions of prestige and power in society. It means that those who choose to live life by the Catholic faith will not be welcomed as political candidates to national office, will not sit on editorial boards of major newspapers, will not be at home on most university faculties, will not have successful careers as actors and entertainers, nor will their children, who will also be suspect. Gee, you know, that sounds really familiar here in America. I can't quite see what group is marginalized like that. Oh, yeah, kind of reminds me of how atheists and agnostics are treated. Not being trusted, not having an atheist president, for example, in many states where atheists are not actually allowed to serve in public office. Sound kind of familiar? The victim mentality, man. What do you guys think?
Well, for me, where he's saying, oh, soon kind of people who want to live by Catholic faith, they won't be allowed to run for political office, they won't be able to. And for me, and I'll need to explain this afterwards, but they shouldn't be allowed to run for political office. What I mean by that is, when they do get elected into office, when they become kind of president, or they're, chancellor of a university, or CEO of a company, when they walk into that boardroom or into the Oval Office, they don't walk in with their religion. They leave that stuff at home. They can keep their religion, but when you go to work in a public office, you leave your religion there. I don't want your kind of views on the supernatural or anything that you believe to influence. I just want you to use your own reason, logic, education, and intellect. I don't think that people should use their religion to justify any real action that they do. And just in regards to his old kind of, he's against abortion and gays, I mean, it's standard, really, and he's right, he is swimming against the tide. And you know what happens when you swim against the tide? You eventually lose, you tire yourself out, and you can't win, and he's not going to win on any of these issues. And people like this, it's already happening, and it'll even pick up at a greater pace in the next few years. They'll just fade into obscurity, and good riddance as far as I'm concerned.
When Catholics were being persecuted or somehow held down, that was in the early 60s. And then John F. Kennedy got the fucking presidency. So I'm pretty sure that plight is over. Secondly,
well, it was until the early 60s. There's a long current of anti-Catholicism in American life.
Right, but before Roe v. Wade, there was a lot of segregation and hardlining between denominations. True enough, but that's you eating your own. Secondly, what really hurts the Catholic Church is the systematic fucking of children and ensuring that those who are raping children do not face justice. Not so much supposed Sharia law and ensuring that you're taking care of your people. So it's like, I really, really hate it when people say this whole, oh, secularism is a religion now or atheism is a religion now. First of all, it denigrates what you understand as a religion because you need relics, you need ritual, you need holy texts, and none of that is in our secular government. And also, you get nothing but protection. Nobody in this country is sending our militarized fucking police officers to kick down your door to pull out all those rapists. Nobody's doing all this crazy stuff that you would think warrants all of this pain and suffering that they're talking about. It's just, it holds us back, this kind of ignorant thinking. And to throw Sharia law, like, there are many people who are dying under Sharia law. There are many people who are getting beheaded. I'm not talking about those two reporters. I'm talking about actual citizens that have to live their day and day through that law. Women who are getting raped, killed, murdered under this law. So no, I'm sorry. You're not suffering under Sharia law. It's not like Sharia law. You don't know the suffering under Sharia law that people actually are going through. I'm not Muslim, but that really just disgusts me to say something like that.
Just before Jordan jumps in, I mean, if you ask this guy, name me one of the laws under Sharia law, I bet he wouldn't be able to list you one. He'd probably fumble and he might be able to guess in a roundabout way, but he wouldn't be able to list you an exact one because he doesn't know what Sharia law is. He just heard the talking points that he's read on online blogs from Fox News. He doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about Sharia law at all.
There's a good example of something that does actually happen under Sharia law. I read a report a couple of days ago where Saudi Arabia, we've got a Saudi viewer, Jamie, and he can corroborate this. 17 people were beheaded. There are still people that are beheaded for witchcraft in Saudi Arabia. That's living under Sharia law. What this guy is saying, having to accept gay people getting married, him having to accept that is the same to him as people getting beheaded every day for witchcraft. It's you can't compare.
Well, in all fairness, that's not what he said. He compared a specific aspect of what he feels is him facing religious persecution to another specific aspect of Sharia law, and that's where my defense of him has to stop, because just like several other people we've looked at tonight, even if you try to meet this guy where he's at, he still doesn't make sense. Like, even if you accept what he says on the face, then it's still not a logical conclusion, because what the specific aspect of Sharia law that he compares it to is Jews and Christian people of the book having to pay the religious tax. You can stay here, you can be Christian, you can be Jews, but you got to pay a tax to your Islamic government because that's the state religion. And what he chooses to compare that to is having to take money in exchange for services from gay people. So he's comparing having your money forcibly taken away from you under Sharia law to having to forcibly make money under U.S. law. So clearly, he hasn't really thought his argument. Again, even if you try to suspend, and meet him where he's at, his argument still makes no sense whatsoever. Again, just to kind of reiterate what's been said here, once the state starts making the church perform marriages that the church doesn't believe in, then that's analogous to some aspects of Sharia law. More importantly, if the state made you as an individual marry a dude if you were a dude, then that would certainly be analogous of a state religion coming in. but the state granting itself the power to grant a civil status, for purposes of tax breaks and other, official legal privileges that the church does not have to recognize in any way, shape, form, or fashion, much less bless, is not analogous to Sharia law in any way. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the separation of church and state. Now, if the state starts forcing the church to do stuff like that, then I'm right there. I'll be the first person to speak out against it, if on more from an American standpoint, because that violates the separation of church and state going the other way. But that's not what's happening here. Nobody's violating the church's rights. We're trying to grant rights to people that don't agree with the church.
But you see this argument a lot throughout all of the religious denominations, is that they invoke this, oh, we're being persecuted thing. We're being persecuted in a country where every single president has been at least a believer of ours in one form or another. We're being persecuted. We're being persecuted in a state where we can make damn sure that our children are taught our idea of what creationism is, as if it's legitimate against evolution. That's their persecution. And I think it's so disheartening, because it's like these people are holding us back from progressing. They're holding us back with this kind of dumb shit, and it really is just them pissed off that they don't have the majority of the pie anymore. They're mad that a lot of younger people are waking up and no longer wanting to be a part of their little crazy ass church, and it's no fault of gays or atheists. It's all their fault and their actions. When you wear the badge of morality and say that you are a non-hateful person, but will create an establishment like Chick-fil-A that will say some hateful shit and encourage people to go and eat your product just to be an asshole to gay people, that doesn't make you look good. When you say things like, oh, we don't need to protect gay children and we don't need to keep them from being bullied, that doesn't make you look good. When you see them complaining about an atheist not wanting to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or say so help me God, or that poor Air Force service member who couldn't re-enlist because he didn't say so help me God, and you don't stand up against that, that doesn't make you look good. So it's like, none of us are fucking up your image. You're doing that just fine all on your own. If you want to fix that, then come back into the 21st century with the rest of us, because everybody's happy. Nobody's trying to be a douchebag to anybody, and that's a good thing. So it's like, jump on board, man, anytime.
I want to go back to something that you said real quick. Swimming against the tide means limiting one's access to positions of prestige and power in society. This is about him and his denomination not wanting to let go of those, or of those prestige positions of power and prestige, and this can be applied to, I guess you could say the WASPs, right? The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who run most of our government at this point. They don't want to give up their positions of power either. And so, this guy is saying, actually, like, yeah, we've got the power as a religion. We don't want to give it away. We don't want to give up any of it. And that's why we're going to fight, we're going to fight secularism. We're going to call it its own religion, which it's not. And we're going to shove all these social issues pretty much down your throat and say, if you don't do anything, it's going to destroy America. No, it's not. Calm down. Everything's going to be okay. You're still going to have your religion. You're still going to have your access to the corridors of power. It's going to be fine. And that's the beauty of a secular nation. That's the beauty of America. And having something called the First Amendment is that you can have a religion and still have access to being represented and still being in those positions of power. And the only thing that these other religions or non-religions, in the case of atheists and agnostics, are also trying to get that access to that power as well, to be able to make sure that they're represented. All right, final story, and then we do a little Q&A. Sound good?
Sure.
It's a humanitarian thing. You're wondering what that's about? We're going to get into it. The people are rallying around a Pennsylvania woman by the name of Carol Jumper after she was fired for having cancer. Interesting. Now, Jumper was diagnosed with cancer that would impact her pancreas, liver, and ovaries. This was back in August. Now, when she informed her boss, an oral hygienist by the name of Dr. George Visnich, he laid her off without compensation. Interesting. Now, she found out about a layoff through the letter that reads as follows. The symptoms of the disease, the pain medications you will need, and the side effects of the chemotherapy will be significant and distracting. Now, you will not be able to function in my office at the level required while battling for your life. Because of this, I am laying you off without pay as of August 11, 2014. Our thoughts and prayers are with you as you fight this horrible disease. Thanks for your time at our oral surgery place. Hope your battle is swift, smooth, and successful. Now, the doctor's attorney told the Beaver County Times that he laid her off so that she could get on unemployment benefits. And he described the layoff as a, quote, a humanitarian thing. From the lawyer, she said, quote, he's trying to help this woman and he's made out to be a villain. She also added that he wrote this letter with the understanding that when she's feeling better, that she's welcome to come back to work. See, she wasn't actually fired. She was just laid off. She can come back to work after she's done with this whole cancer thing. Cancer patients, by the way, are protected against being fired under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So as long as they can still do the job's essential functions, they can't get fired. They're protected. Now, we don't actually know what her job was. But let me get into something a little bit personal here. My father, my dad, recently diagnosed with a type of throat cancer. It was back this spring. Now, he spent the summer doing chemotherapy, radiation, and even now, he's still finding it a hard time to swallow. He can't eat anything. But he's back to work. He's doing 6-hour shifts. Now, he does quality management, which is a desk job. And I could understand laying her off if she couldn't do the job, if she were an oral surgeon or if she was a nurse or somebody who had to be on her feet a lot. I totally understand that. But if she was a secretary, she had a desk job, or if she could have a smaller role as she goes through this difficult time, that would be much more understandable. But if not, this could really run up against the ADA and perhaps get this guy in trouble. I'm going to get your guys' thoughts about this.
I think it's a case of just being very, very poorly handled. I don't necessarily think that this guy is a villainous guy, that he's a villain, but the way that he's acted is certainly not the kindest way. Now, as you said, we don't actually know what this woman's job was, but for this, I'm going to assume that it wasn't just a simple desk job. Just the way he worded the letter, I get the sense that, if he's an oral surgeon, she might have been helping him out. But again, that's speculation. But admittedly, when you're going through chemotherapy on these drugs, you're not at 100% peak health. And you don't, if I found out that someone wasn't at peak health and they're operating on me, I'd be a bit, wary about it. But all he needed to do really was to kind of, when he found out, call her into his office. It's like, okay, I know you're going through this horrible thing. Obviously, you probably won't, I can't really employ you throughout the entire time when you're going through the chemotherapy. It's just, I wouldn't feel comfortable for my patients and stuff. But look, I think, that financially for you, it'd be better if I laid you off. You can claim some unemployment benefit and stuff, and you can still be getting money that way. Maybe I can kind of pay you, keep you on part-time. You can help out with some paperwork, and then when you're fully recovered, you can come back. And if he'd done something like that, perfectly fine. I don't think anyone would have had any qualms. This wouldn't have been a story. But the fact he just wrote a handwritten letter, he hasn't even called her, hasn't contacted her, it's just really cold, kind of heartless, and it's callous. Maybe he was looking for a way to get rid of her, and this he just thought, oh, jackpot, here's where I can lay her off for a while. But yeah, this has been dealt with really poorly with him, and I hope that that she sues, because as you said, it's you can't discriminate against people with cancer, and you can't fire them if they've developed cancer. So I hope that she sues, and I hope she gets better, and I hope she gets her job back, certainly.
Well, I mean, I love that you're way more optimistic in this man's actions. I personally think he's a motherfucker. But the underlying issue here is that a lot of businesses do their damnedest to avoid having to deal with women's health issues, because whether we like it or not, if you're a woman, your health costs are exponentially higher than men. And if he's providing health care to this woman, then her issues are going to raise his prices up. I'm pretty sure he's trying to dodge that. I can't speak for him, but that's kind of what it feels like. And you cannot, just because she was diagnosed when he fired her. It's not like she already went through the chemo a little bit and started slowing down. This was a preemptive firing, which the law says you cannot do. The only time that that's allowed is if that worker shows that they are incapable of facilitating their job, which is something that she obviously did not show. So it's like, you're not doing her any favors. If you're firing her, you're putting her in a stressful position. Stress does not make the cancer go away. So you're probably enhancing her situation and making her health even worse. And I don't know where people think this unemployment benefit shit is like amazing to live off of, but it kind of sucks. It's not something that you can just keep on living your daily lifestyle on and just, go on and do something else or go on and deal with your medical bills. So it's like unemployment benefits does not help that much. So it probably would have been better for her to stay with her job. Now, my aunt had breast cancer, and she continued to work at a library, of course, but she continued to work throughout that entire situation. So it's not impossible. You're not an invalid. And I think a lot of cancer patients would probably feel a little offended at the fact that somebody's trying to treat them as if they are completely incapable of doing their job when they're not. I've never met a cancer patient that had that kind of defeatist attitude. So for her community and her job to do that to her, that's not right. And he's definitely a villain in my view.
Yeah, this dude is getting trashed. I'm like reading online reviews now, and everything since September 11th is just like, since the story broke, he is getting destroyed, like on Facebook, on Google, and like all this stuff. Like if you Google this guy, like people are coming for him, man. But I'm glad Steven kind of did the thing I normally do, so I don't have to do it so hard. Like I'm trying to find a reason to like maybe see where he's coming from. And the only one I can think of is kind of racialist, so I'm afraid to say it, but, Jink gets away with saying racialist stuff. Like, maybe from, like, looking at his name, maybe he's not a native English speaker, so, like, that's why the letter is worded so poorly. I don't know. I'm really reaching here. To Jeff's point, she wasn't, like, a surgeon assistant or whatever. Like, she's not, holding tools like where if her hand shakes, like she's going to cut a nerve in somebody's jaw. Like she's admin. So I don't know. I mean, I can't really find a reason to stand by this guy. And
Jordan, if you have to reach, then there is no reason to stand by.
No, that's not true.
If you have to circle the wagon, scratch your head, jump up and down, do smoke signals, have a seance to figure out what this guy is doing is kind of sort of has like an inkling of a nice thing, then if you have to work that hard at it, then maybe he's not doing it to be nice, because nice actions are very, very obvious. Nice actions and being an upfront and honest person is obvious. You don't have to reach for it. And
Jordan, if Haven's words don't sway you, think about this.
I'm not saying I'm not swayed. Like I think he's a pretty, like, that's my conclusion. I'm with you guys. I'm just like, that's kind of my point, that it's so hard to like paint this guy as a good guy. I don't know, man. It seems like a bad situation.
Right. But you're looking, out of complete fairness, you're looking for something, to defend this guy with. Let me make a case against that as well, and add to what Haven was saying, the whole unemployment thing, saying that I'm doing this as a humanitarian thing, putting you on the taxpayer's dime. Instead of mine, instead of being a good employer and helping you with your medical costs, as my valued employee of 12 years, letting you do this on my insurance or offering some sort of insurance option, whatever. Yeah, we don't know his financial situation, and that's fair to say that. But saying, here you go, I'm going to let you go so the taxpayer can take care of that. It doesn't really speak well to his motivations.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I assume that an oral surgeon makes decent money and could probably afford to be charitable with an employee of 12 years. But I don't, again, I don't know his books. Like, that's an assumption. But it's like I say, man. It's and really the one reason why I can't even buy my own, like why I can't persuade myself on the idea that, maybe he's not a native English speaker and this is just a poorly worded letter, because it says in the article that he also hasn't contacted her to like clear up the thing. Like, he's put out statements for the public, but he hadn't called her since he laid her off, to like talk about it. So I don't know, it just really seems like the guy just saw a chance to get rid of an employee who'd been there for a while and maybe bring in somebody he could pay less. I don't know.
I'm telling you, man, I said it earlier, we're living in an age where people don't want to be assholes to each other all the time. And we are starting to recognize when other people are getting screwed over, because lo and behold, we're all in the grits. Whether we like it or not, we're all getting screwed one way or another. And we Americans, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people all around the world, are tired of it. We're tired of it. We're tired of seeing people and bosses do things like this to people who don't deserve it and just get away with it and then get mad because somebody's calling you out as being a jerk. You're a jerk. That's a jerk thing to do. Nobody, if your grandmother will look at you with disgust, then you probably shouldn't have done it, because that's a jerk thing to do. And it probably definitely hurt this lady. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. And there is one good thing that you can actually take from this, and that goes to proving your point as how people aren't really going to stand for this anymore, is the fact that so many people have rallied in the defense of Carol Jumper and have created fundraisers, and the community has just had a massive outpouring of support to help her get through this difficult time. So I think you can really take that as just a good sign that people, when they hear about something like this, they go, no, that's not right. I'm going to help. I'm going to help with what little I can, and we're going to band together, and we're going to do what we can for this lady because of the injustice that's happened to her. All right. That does it for the first hour of the Social Justice Hour. Somehow this has turned into a 2-hour show without me knowing. But we can do some Q&A unless anybody has anything that they would like to present real quick. We can have a discussion about it as the audience will gather around their questions. And look, I just got fatter on my screen. So, if there's anything you guys want to present while we gather up the questions real quick, that's great. Start a discussion, or maybe bring up something from what we talked about tonight that we didn't get to go into as much detail on, and you want to flesh out a little bit more.
I did want to point out there's an article, well, not so much an article, but Anthony Weiner posted this expose that he wrote about how he doesn't appreciate Elizabeth Warren attacking Wall Street because they're really good guys, and how he agrees with Eric Cantor. And one of the signals that I knew that people are starting to come together and notice that they are all in the same boat of, yeah, fuck you guys, is all those comments were pretty much telling Anthony Weiner that he's an idiot for even thinking that going in that direction would be the right way. Because Elizabeth Warren is addressing very serious situations that are at the hands of these Wall Street Journal or these Wall Street cats. She's talking about these people's kids being buried under mountains of student debt. She's talking about everybody, having to worry about whether their homes are being, taken right from underneath them. Like, that's important stuff. And it was just really an uplifting thing to see that everybody's really starting, that light is finally coming on, where it doesn't matter if you're conservative, progressive, redneck, city slick. People are starting to realize, like, hey, maybe these guys aren't really for us. I mean, the only people that I see that are starving right now are the other people, and I don't think that's fair. And I loved that people displayed that and called him on his bullshit almost immediately.
Point of that article that I want to add to it. What a dick.
My completely unsubstantiated 100% speculation theory is that he is just all kinds of jelly because he was the left-wing darling and he screwed it up because he's a moron, and now Elizabeth Warren has not only usurped him but like gone above and beyond anything he ever was, because she doesn't just grandstand for cameras, she also actually works to do her job and make change, and he can't stand it. Again, nothing to back that up. I just wanted to get a dig in on a guy that I know nothing about.
Steven, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I agree more with Hayden's point. I don't think that he's probably a little bit jealous. I do get that, but I think he's now, because he's not going to be able to get into politics, and he's going to have to be friendly with the business types, because that's really the only way he's going to make any money, and so that's why he's saying it. And maybe he's hoping that, if he bashes Warren a bit, then someone in Clinton's campaign may go, oh look, he kind of did us a bit of a solid back then, but no, Wiener's kind of fallen into complete obscurity now. He couldn't keep in his trousers, and that was the kind of the death of his career.
Yeah, look, the way that I see it is that I think he's looking out to try to make some new friends. His political career is over, as far as we know. I mean, he tried getting back into it, didn't work. And so he's trying to look to make a little friend, to make some friends, make a little bit of money. Oh, how dare you attack Wall Street? These are great guys. I really want to be friends with these guys so they can hook me up with a sweet-ass job. That's sort of how it works. Whether they would want someone maybe they would want somebody like Anthony Weiner on their side so they could say, hey, look, we got this guy. He's kind of a dick, but he'll work for us. He'll work with us. He's our friend. I don't know. All right. Thank you, Haven, for bringing that up. I also thought that article was pretty interesting, and the huge backlash from people that are just like, yeah, no, not buying it, dude. Get out of here. Don't you have some junk to tweet out? I have to stop, or else I'm just gonna keep making bad dick puns.
Yeah, nobody wants to follow Dick Pick Wiener. Everybody's over him.
Right. All right. So Q&A then. We've got some questions lined up now. So let's just do this in order of received. Something about trial by combat? This is from Empyrean Cypher, I'm guessing. Do you notice that some people have noticed that Jordan and Sean don't be on the same panel anymore? Well, that's because they're the same person. Jordan is wearing Sean wears a Jordan mask. This is actually Sean. Surprised?
That's the most offensive thing anyone's ever said to me.
It's a good mask, though.
It's a gorgeous mask if it were a mask, but it's not. And you're quickly moving up my list of most hated people.
I still haven't replaced Sean yet, though. Not yet. Okay, So, real question.
Well, let me answer that question because that's a fun question, but it's a legitimate thing. No, well, Sean and I were on a panel together week before last, whatever his first little comeback show was. I normally do Thursdays. Friday is kind of not out of the ordinary for me. But last night I had spoke out against some things that a church was doing in my local community. And some people in the church rightfully pointed out that, until I actually went to the event that I took such issue with, then, maybe I didn't know what I was talking about. So I said that's a fair point, and that's where I was last night at that event, getting all of my worst fears confirmed and my heart broken about what was going on at this particular church. But yeah, so that's, I had a kind of an obligation of intellectual honesty to go and kind of back up my actions there. So I wasn't able to join the show tonight, and so I came tonight.
All right. While the value of social justice activism is obvious in most instances, are there certain areas where such ideological arguments don't have a place? Not at all.
The arguments may not have a place, but social justice will always have a place in everything. It's the justice of the society. And if you're a gamer, that is a society. And I'm pretty sure what's part of Gamergate is that some of these gamers are getting screwed over. So you would want your society to bring justice and fairness into your group. So social justice is needed everywhere because it affects everyone, because everyone is part of society. But that's, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird that way.
Well, there's this thing that I've noticed going through comments and things like for the Gamergate thing is that a lot of people have the wrong view on social justice. They see social justice as something that's radical, something that's PC, that's trying to, take away open discourse. That's not what social justice is about. And I've often seen the pejorative of social justice warrior, which I consider. And it's also the same thing you see the pejorative of feminism. And it's really what it means to the specific person, because what those actually mean is all has to do with how you define it in that specific time, specific context. And right now, people are defining social justice as a bad thing, which it isn't. It's not it's not a bad thing. Social justice is a good thing. It's a necessary thing in society, just as Haven had said.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people are like, "Oh, I don't do politics. I don't like politics." It's like, that's unfortunate because it really does touch every aspect of your life. Like, if you want your highway to stay paved, that takes politics. Like, everything is anything that's connected to human activity is going to be something you are forced to be a part of, because unfortunately you're a human. I don't know what to tell people about things like that.
All right. We're missing Steven, actually. He had some sort of issue, but we will continue with some questions. Let's see. I believe it was Tom that asked this question. If we gave libertarians 365 days to rule with everything they want, how quickly do you think they'd bed for liberalism or socialism? Well, for me, I think it depends on how much money you have in a libertarian system. If it were a pure libertarian system, those with the most resources and power will do just fine. In fact, they might even do just better, at least for the short term. If it's for the regular Joe living in, I don't know, say in New York, might not fare as well. Just my opinion.
Yeah, that's a solid point, man. Like, I think it would just reinforce everything that wealthy libertarians, I believe most libertarians probably are, fairly wealthy. It would reinforce everything they believe, because they would do much better than most other people, especially if it was just over the course of a year, where the long-term effects and degradation really wouldn't have time to set in. I do think it might be interesting to see because we do have this. I mean, I live in the heartland of it here in the South, where people are kind of tricked into voting into policies that do not benefit them. And I'd be interested to see, not that I want this to happen, but it would be intellectually interesting to see if maybe the number of lower income libertarians would decrease, as they wouldn't get to see the benefits of it like the more wealthy ones would. But I get where Tom's coming from, and thanks for the question, Tom. But they also probably wouldn't beg for socialism or liberalism. They probably beg for what we have now, which, for all its faults, can be a system that's beneficial to a lot of people. They'd certainly beg for libertarianism to go away. So, in that sense, you're dead on.
What they would do is probably install all of the government programs that they don't realize this would be taken away and call it their idea. Like, a lot of libertarians want to get rid of, like, they just think government in general. But what they don't understand is that government makes sure that your water doesn't taste like shit. And I mean that literally. Like, government makes sure that when you eat into a sandwich, there's no rat tail in it, or a finger. Government makes sure that when you go to work, you hurt yourself.
The market will self-correct.
Oh, yeah, of course, because the market never does anything that would make sure that their bottom line is always good. Like, the libertarian argument is always, it's like this ancient argument where we're repeating history. It's like they'll talk about the EPA, but it's like, okay, well, there was a lake that used to be on fire in this country, which was the whole reason why the EPA was created in the first place. And lo and behold, we haven't had any lakes on fire anymore. So thank you, Nixon, for that. So it's like, why are you, like, everybody hates government until that motherfucker is gone. And then when you don't have the protections, when you do have bigger businesses willing and able to completely monopolize whatever business you think that you're going to be able to, put forth in your new society, then it's all different. And then probably would instill the exact same apparatuses that we have and just be like, oh, shit. This is the new libertarianism now.
And they would call it social libertarianism and say, look at this, the market self-corrected. Okay, sure. Another question, what we have here is, now, this comes from Eva. I'm not sure what IEF veteran is. Maybe you could...
Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom.
Thank you. Acronyms. Bah. Anyway, just looking at it in strategics, why not let Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar at all, because they have more vested interest in bringing down ISIS, bring it down, except obviously for the oil. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I think that not just Saudi Arabia or Jordan, but I think we should also bring in Israel. I know that's impossible, but if you look at what ISIL means, it's the Islamic State of Syria or of Iraq and Levant. Levant is an ancient area that encompasses all of those Muslim states that you've mentioned, as well as Israel. So everybody in that sector has a vested interest in ensuring that ISIS doesn't succeed. But we're not going to do that because that means that we would have like some comprehensive idea on how to properly combat things like ISIS. And we don't want to fix ISIS. We want to play whack-a-mole and then get rid of ISIS and then have another group pop up and then get rid of them and have another group pop up because the military-industrial complex has to feed itself somehow.
Yeah, and I don't know that that everybody in that list of countries does have a more vested interest than we do. For instance, to Haven's point, like ISIL ain't messing with Israel. And the reason ISIL ain't messing with Israel is because Israel would wipe ISIL off the face of the planet. ISIL ain't messing with Egypt, even though the Sinai Peninsula is part of the Levant, because Egypt has a military to wipe ISIL off the planet. ISIL is messing with countries that it knows it can pick a fight with, and you can make the argument that even though Saudi Arabia has the equipment, they don't necessarily they can't really use it. It's just there to look pretty. So I wouldn't be surprised to see ISIL pick a fight with Saudi Arabia eventually, or more scarily, maybe ally with Saudi Arabia in some way. But the other reason too is because that list of countries is at odds with one another. You know, like there's Sunni and Shia splits there. There's those were all Arab countries that were named. I don't think she named Turkey, but you know, this is like not a homogenous region. They don't all view ISIL as a threat or as an existential threat. They may be viewed as a nuisance, but you know, it's a situation where destabilization of one player is to the benefit of another player in the region. And I guess that's something maybe that we as Americans don't appreciate because we are such a huge, you know, landmass. And then Canada to our north and Mexico to our south, we've had great relationships with for decades and decades and decades. So like it's a little different for us to see a region, especially one that's united by, or loosely speaking, united by a religion like the Middle East is, and not realize like how at odds with one another each individual player is. And of course, a lot of that has to do with us carving up the region, you know, arbitrarily with no regard for those differences. But that's, you know, another discussion for another day.
Well, one unifying fact is that ISIS also called a caliphate, and that's not something that just affects just the region that they hold. A caliphate is supposed to oversee all of Islam. So that's a problem, because I'm pretty sure none of these other countries agree that the guy that they picked as the caliphate should be the caliphate. So if all it takes is just the right amount of funding, and this is one of the fastest growing financially terrorist groups that we've seen so far, and all it takes is the right amount of connections, and it's not like they're in areas that don't have decent enough weapons that can cause at least a little bit of a ruckus. So it's like it is in their vested interest, because there are ISIS sympathizers within each of these countries, and above all, they want to keep stabilization within their own country. They don't want to see Syria happening with them, and especially in Egypt, where they've already had an uprising. They don't want to see those young people identifying with ISIS or at least their tactics and wanting to adopt them. So everybody at some form of fashion has a vested interest in moving away from this unbelievably extremist Islamic, you know, tactics, and moving into a more, you know, cohesive working environment.
Well, I mean, the thing is as well is that all of these countries that were listed, they all have different motives, and you're right, and they all have different interests. And the problem is that if they all suddenly agreed, right, this is exactly what we're going to do, here's a plan, we're going to equally divvy up who's going to be doing what in eradicating ISIS, then yes, they have the potential to be able to do that. But the problem is, as you just said, they're so divergent, they have different motives and so on, that they wouldn't be able to do it. And so the reason why America oftentimes has to step in, because it's one nation that can go into, okay, this is going to be our plan. Okay, most of the time you don't necessarily go in with an actual plan, but you say, this is what we're going to attempt to do, and you have the resources to at least try and carry out that plan without having to agree with other nations. You can just go forward and start a war if you want. Whereas with, you know, Saudi Arabia, you get Pakistan, Iran, Egypt involved, it requires a lot of diplomacy and communication, and, you know, whilst I don't want to make a slight at those countries, I just don't think it would be practically possible for them to be able to do that, certainly in this given situation and scenario. So that's one of the reasons as well as to why just trying to ask those countries to sort it out themselves just wouldn't work.
I guess that's some really solid points there, Nick. And then the one other thing that I'd kind of maybe want to point out is that although I don't know that every one of the countries listed there, and certainly not every one of the countries in the region, you know, just because the country is close to where this is going on doesn't mean that they necessarily have a vested interest in it. I do think it's undeniable that some of them have a vested interest in not getting into it. And what I mean by that is the first one of these countries, whether it's Israel or Saudi Arabia or Iran, which I don't think was listed, or Turkey or Egypt, you know, one of these countries that is powerful enough to really wage war against ISIS and overcome ISIS, that's still going to be an asymmetrical, long, drawn-out war, and we've seen what those can do to a superpower firsthand. Like, we've seen how much they degrade the standing of a superpower. So in this region where you've got players, whether it's Saudi Arabia v. Iran, or Turkey versus the Arab and Persian world, whether it's Egypt versus more into the subcontinent, these countries that are all sitting around waiting for these arguably equal powers for somebody to emerge, have a vested interest to see one of them make the first move and get dragged into a war that diminishes their standing in the region. So my completely not Middle Eastern expert opinion is that's probably what's going on here. Is we're seeing them wait to see who moves first, because there's a good chance that whoever moves first gets stuck in a war they don't want to be in.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But sorry, hello everybody. I had to jump in. This is one of my favorite topics. International military affairs.
You had to jump in. You can't
Only on this
resist
one,
the
I
foreign
swear.
policy.
I swear. Otherwise, I was content to listening until this story, and then I was like, okay, I have to come in. The simplest answer and the most primary and painfully obvious answer is they don't have the military might to mess with ISIS or ISIL. They don't. They have the hardware, as has been stated. They don't have the know-how to use it. They don't have the military capacity or size or infrastructure to use it or to follow through with that. There's a reason Saudi Arabia hasn't really been involved in a major war for a long, long time. There's a reason Jordan has also been pretty buddy-buddy with Israel and the surrounding region, and trying to be basically the moderate Islamic state of the area, the one that people go, oh look, see, you can have an Islamic monarchy in it, it's fine. See,
well,
it's
the moderate Arab state.
The moderate Arab state,
long
yes.
established itself as the moderate Islamic state in the area.
Yes, this is true as well. Sorry, but no, none of those powers have the military capacity to get involved in something with ISIL, for the very simple reason that ISIL probably might even outnumber some of their armies, but B, it would be such as Jordan pointed out, such a massive destabilizing feature for even a superpower. These places cannot, these monarchies and these governments cannot afford to risk that destabilization on their own terms, because it would spread. Not necessarily extremism, but popularizings would spread throughout these places, because they would notice a breakdown of the system. It would fall apart.
All right. So with that all settled, let's get to I think it was here. And this was actually directed at Jordan. It was about the teen that was arrested for basically doing a lewd sex act with a Jesus statue. And the question was pretty much, wanted to get your thoughts on this. What do you think? I mean, is it defacing something that means a lot, or I believe he might be even looking at getting 2 years for it, so I'm not sure.
Well, of course it's defacing something that means a lot, and I'm going to go ahead and not be my normal nuanced self here and give a pretty straightforward answer. So freaking what? This is America. You have a right to deface something that means a lot, and I say that as the Christian in the room. It does offend me to see somebody do that, to something I hold dear, but not so, at the same time I realize, he's not actually doing that to Jesus. It breaks my heart to see someone who means as much good as I think the person of Jesus Christ has to offer, to see someone not realize that. That's what makes me sad about it. I could care less about my holy indignation about some object getting defamed. It's ridiculous. I mean, maybe if you want to hit the kid for indecent exposure or something that he would get if he was doing that to a pole or something, I guess maybe you can do that. But the fact that it's a Jesus statue doesn't give it some kind of special legal status that that same act wouldn't be violating to any other object. That's ridiculous, man. This is America. That's a flat out religious crime that the kid's going to get 2 years for that's ridiculous. You can't do that.
Yeah,
but
last time I checked, idolatry is not part of the Christian faith. Sorry, Hayden. Go ahead.
But I mean, not putting a kid in jail for defacing Jesus is obviously why Christians are so persecuted in this country right now. And if we don't do something about these crazy kids doing these crazy things, then the world's going to fall apart. It's really interesting that this area would even think to do this. His penis wasn't out. Yes, it was very distasteful to do that. I'm personally more offended if he were to wear skinny jeans. But it's like he did it, and I mean, I don't think that he should be completely unpunished. I think that somebody should address punishing him, because what he did was very disrespectful, and he has to learn to respect, people's sensibilities, but not through the judicial system. That's something that a parent's job is for. That's what having moms and dads are there for.
Absolutely.
What about community service? Would you be open to
No.
just doing like
No.
I'm with Haven and Jordan on this one. No, I'm even like you think maybe parents or perhaps community thinks he should maybe be disciplined, but it should never be judicial. I would even side of maybe he shouldn't face any discipline at all. In part because I find it a tiny bit funny, but that's just me, and so I recognize that's my personal opinion. But no, the fact that he might be facing any jail time for this is utterly insane. And I wanted to ask Jordan something a little bit too. You referred to that the statue isn't the actual Jesus, obviously. If there was an actual, say Jesus had actually been caught in such a compromising position, would that have changed your opinion on Jesus in the slightest, even in that case? Probably not. Probably not. Wouldn't have changed your opinion on Jesus, even if he had been caught doing something like that. Because it doesn't negate the good work of Jesus, does it?
Well, in this situation, I feel like Jesus would have been being mouth raped. So I don't know that.
Fair. I was more operating under the premise that Jesus was a voluntary participant, but okay.
After all Jesus has done for us, he can't do something voluntarily and do something for himself. What's your problem, bro?
He wants to give back to the community, Jordan. God.
I feel like the community was giving it to Jesus in this situation. I don't know. Maybe I'm not on the same page as to what happened as you guys are, but that's a weird question, man.
What I was saying is, if Jesus turned out to be gay, you wouldn't give a shit in the slightest either, because it doesn't negate the good work Jesus did.
I don't think that my opinion of Jesus is based around what he did so much as who he was. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird kind of question begging thing to say. I don't really know how to answer it, to tell you the truth.
Fair enough.
And guys, I was just throwing out the question. To be honest, I don't really care enough about this. It's a kid doing a prank. He just shouldn't get 2 years in prison. You're right. Judicial system shouldn't get involved in this whole thing. That's my 2 cents on this. But I kind of want to wrap the show up since we don't have any more questions.
Wait. You can't do that yet, because first, hi Haven, nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm glad that you kiboshed our little powwow here. Welcome.
You were talking my stuff. I had to.
Yeah. So anyway, Steven just got back in here, so let's ask him real quick and get his thoughts, and then we'll close out the show about the 14-year-old facing a possibility of 2 years for doing what appears to be, or having a statue of Jesus do what appears to be oral sex on him.
Yeah, no, he shouldn't be giving any punishment whatsoever. If you're offended by that, then I'm sorry, that's tough shit. Offense is never given; it is only ever taken in by people. And so, if it hurt your feelings, that he defaced your God, it's like the whole kind of cartoon Muhammad and stuff like that. I'm sorry, I don't really care about your feelings in regards to your make-believe friend. It's absolute nonsense, and if anything, I'd give the kid a high five.
I was just about to say, Steven wants to reward the kid. Let's keep it real. We don't have to ask him. And then he said it.
He's like, good job. we're all like, maybe you shouldn't do that. Like everybody else is like,
I wasn't.
maybe you shouldn't
I
do
was
that.
kind of on the same page as Steven for a bit. I was kind of like, it was kind of funny.
I'd double team the Jesus with him and high five him over the middle.
Cypher has pointed out in the chat, the church didn't press charges here, so kudos to the church. It's the city is coming after the kid, not the church.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up tonight. Thank you guys for watching the TYT Community Social Justice Show. I've been your fill-in host for Rhiannon Avenue, Jeff Waldorf. I want to thank everybody who came out here to join the panel, even our latecomer who didn't join any of the other conversations. Shame on you.
You had it down. You didn't need my help, sir. You guys did phenomenal tonight.
To be fair, we did have it on lockdown. To be fair. But I want to thank Haven for coming out, Stephen for staying up with us, Jordan for broadcasting from the office, and Nick, of course, from a very darkened room. Kind of creepy there. And I want to thank not just the panelists for coming out here tonight to be on the Social Justice Show. I want to thank you guys at home for watching us for 2 whole hours, asking your questions, and being supportive of the show. Your support means a hell of a lot to us here at TYT Community. We're so glad that you guys come out each and every Thursday, Friday night to be on the show, to not just be on the show, as Haven was, as who's also a viewer, but to watch the show at home, to like the show, to subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Jeff, if somebody wanted to support the show financially directly, how could they do that?
I was going to get to that. I got this plug thing down now. If you do want to support the show, such as Julie, who's one of our patrons, you can go to patreon.com/TYTNation. That helps support us, keep us going, and actually helps me to improve our capabilities here on YouTube. Unfortunately, there are some things that we can't fix, like the unfortunate lag that Google seems to be having in typing, and as well as live streaming. I do apologize for that, but as technology improves and as money improves, I'll be able to find solutions around that to be able to give you a good show that is not interrupted as much by lag, maybe a T1 or a fiber line or something like that, if I could ever afford it in a proper studio. So there's one of the wish lists. There's something on my wish list for today. Fiber optic to give you a non-choppy streaming experience. Wouldn't that be amazing? So anyway, if you want to chip into that, patreon.com/TYTNation, facebook.com/TYTNation, Twitter @JustPolitics, @TYT Community. Make sure to check out, of course, Haven's channel, PyroHaven07, is it?
07, yeah.
And follow her on Twitter @HavenGOTS. She does put out some great videos, so check those out and subscribe to her channel, help her out. Of course, Flintstoning Tom, who is a listener of the show, watches the show, also has the radio show on mix.lr, Some Say Info, My Liberals Live, My Libs Live, MyLiberals.com. Check him out. There was a little bit of a cat fight between Dan and Nick today over Gamergate, so if you're interested in that, check that out if you haven't already. I gotta get on
that show.
Yeah. Jordan, you should go on Sunday because Tom's going to have Sean on, and they're going to talk about the concept of freedom, and I think you'd love to chime in there.
Ooh. Wolf.
If you haven't been on Tom's show, you should. It isn't just Tom. It's an open call-in show where we talk to Silas and all those great guys who also call in to be part of the show. Jammy, you can talk to Jammy. He's pretty cool. Our Saudi Arabian viewer. So you guys are awesome, and I love talking to you guys on My Libs Live. So go there, listen to that show. Like he's got this whole thing. He's got this radio thing down. So.
Yeah, I was on today for the first time, and I can vouch for how good it is and how fun it was. So be sure to check that show out, guys.
Hey, Tom, as long as it's not on during the race, I'll call you on Sunday. But Sunday's NASCAR day, and you don't mess with NASCAR day.
Yeah, you really are from the South.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's a redneck joke in there somewhere.
Sunday is church
Is that
in the
diverse
morning,
community?
NASCAR in the afternoon.
Yeah, Sunday's Quidditch day for me.
Oh, me too.
Uh,
Yes.
6 p.m. Sunday, Tom's show. He does
What time?
6 p.m.
6
I
p.m.
believe that's Eastern. So if you can make that for Tom's show, some say Sundays. So, and here we are giving plugs out to other people's shows, you know? Aren't we awesome? But anyway, check those shows out, check those channels out, subscribe to our channel as well, TYT Nation, and for everyone here at the TYT community, I wish you to have a awesome weekend. You guys take care of yourselves, and we'll see you back next week for the News and Politics Hour.
Good night.
All right, guys.
God bless.
Good night, everybody.
Laters.